Live from Washington, D.C., it's the Pay Dirt Football Show.
Are you trying to give me the double talk?
You talk too much.
And now, sit back and listen to 2 hours of biased, brainless blithering sure to drop your sports IQ by at least 20 points.
7 years of college down the drain.
Pay Dirt is on the air.
All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to the PAFL version of the Pay Dirt Football Show. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this right over to Calvin because I'm still trying to work the bugs out here. It's been a while since we did this. Calvin, I take it you all cannot see the screen, right?
We cannot see the screen. We could not hear the intro.
Okay, well, while you're talking to everyone, I will get things set up here. So it's off to you.
Very good. Well, we just want to say hello to our PAFL and PSAFL community. And I have also Joe is here if he wants to say hello.
Hello, one and all.
And we kind of got a plan for tonight. This is I think, our second show of the year. We like to try to do these monthly. Sometimes that's not possible. And first topic we're going to go through pretty much the standings, if you will, and talk about teams that are positioned for the playoffs. And if you're not positioned for the playoffs, I don't have any notes on that, but, we may wing something on that if y'all want. But primary focus that I put together was let's just talk mid-season, basically, how teams doing, surprises, who looks good for the playoffs, who looks in trouble, and take it from there. And now we can see Len's screen.
Yeah, I'll get you the. You can't hear yet, though, can you?
Cannot hear anything.
Okay, well, I'll get.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get you that too.
We miss Lynn's fancy intro music. But so we'll dive right in. I'll start with the NFC East. Joe, I started NFC over AFC, just kind of the way I'm wired. And first, NFC East, of course, is the surprising team of the year. Washington 7-2 for Andy. We've been chatting on Slack. We're not sure he's ever been in first. Maybe not. I think I looked up a couple weeks ago. Washington only had one winning record, one winning season, I do believe. They're setting 7-2. They are playing well. Sure, you could say they've got the fifth place schedule. And for those that don't know, we copied the actual NFL schedule that was in place when the NFL had 28 teams. So we are copying that, and we rotate through the cycle. There's a 6-year cycle. Basically, every team will play every other division in the other. There can be some exceptions if you're a fifth place team. But while I ramble, Washington finished fifth last year, so they have got the fifth place schedule, which you could say is slightly easier as they get Tampa Bay was the other fifth place team. Twice they get New Orleans, and it was either Kansas City or Seattle. I can't remember. But back to the point, they're 7-2, and they're looking good. When I look at their schedule, they're quote-unquote more doable games. They've got a rematch with Tampa Bay. They defeated Tampa Bay. And they also have a rematch with New Orleans, a team that they lost to. And you may say, well, why 2 games against New Orleans? The schedule that we use from the 28 team days of the NFL, there was only a 16-game schedule. So we added a 17th game where we basically ranked teams from last year on their schedule, who finished first in the NFC to who finished 14th. And we did the same thing on the AFC, and we lined them up, first versus first, second versus second, third versus third, etc. So Washington got the schedule, but they're still winning the games, which, in action, it can be a challenge to win games. Andy even threatened to throw his PC out the window or something, break his PC a couple weeks ago, and it can be quite frustrating. So that they're easier games are what I see: Tampa Bay and New Orleans. Now their divisional games, they've still got to play Philadelphia twice. Philadelphia is not like Rick's teams of the past. and Joe and I have coached them in vain. They also play the Giants again where they won, and they play Carolina again where they lost. And they've got 2 games, which I put in the harder category, against the Rams in Arizona. And my last comment on this, Jimmy G only has about 30 passes left. So if the Commanders are going to fly, it's going to be with Matty Ice at the helm. So your thoughts on Washington, Joe?
Well, I think Washington, and obviously I think, and I hate to go across conferences, but New Orleans and Washington are probably the surprise teams of the year. But both teams are going to face a lot of challenges down the stretch. And part of the reason is because of usage and injuries. I've kidded Don that he can barely have enough linebackers to play a game, and then also, like I said, Andy, he's going to have some usage issues as well. But if you end up like right now 7-2, well, he only needs 2 or 3. He needs 3 more wins to have 10, and I think 10 wins will get you in the playoffs. Now, whether he wins the division or not, that's a different story altogether. Carolina's got a very tough team, and they don't have quite the amount of usage issues that Andy's got. But get to the show, you get to the playoffs. History has shown anything can happen. So,
yeah, 10 games is good. He's got a realistic shot at 10. It just depends. And just an aside, Len, we are hearing music now.
Yeah, I had to go back in and redo the settings.
Okay. So I don't know if Len wants to opine on Washington or have Joe and I just keep rolling with it.
Well, it's nice to see Washington doing well in the division. I hope they continue. I like to root for the underdog, and it's been a while since Washington's. I don't know, have they ever won this division?
No.
I don't think they have.
No, only one winning season.
Yeah.
And that's good. We kind of strive for teams to rebuild quickly. And I think in Andy's case, I don't think he'd mind me saying this, in the early years, he was too married to Redskins, Washington, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, he was.
And he was ripped off on trades. Or, that's kind of strong, he was paying A-plus prices.
He let emotions get in the way of his team building, is what he did. Because he's, I could see myself doing that. I'm a Cowboy fan, so I could make the same mistakes, wanting to get the players that I'm familiar with. But it's not always the smartest move, and I know that he did used to do that. I think he's stopped doing it to a point now. But you're right. Carolina's right on his rear end here, and they don't have the usage problems. That's one of the problems with Dallas this year is the usage issues. And not to mention that for the last couple seasons, I've really noticed that Cousins just doesn't perform. He has just stopped performing at all. I doubt he's got I know he doesn't have 60% completion. I doubt very seriously. I've played most of the games, but a couple of them I've let him play versus the computer or find a sim, not because I didn't want to play, but it's just been a heck of a month or two for me. But 0-8, and I never play to not win, and it has just been a problem. This team has been a real problem for me this year.
Absolutely. Well, plus also, I tend to think, and I've come to this conclusion, that certain teams, coaches, play different quarterbacks differently.
Yeah, right.
Like, for instance, Bob, he did nothing but complain about how horrible Derek Carr is. I am used to playing with Derek Carr, and so I like Derek Carr, and he was doing very well until this last week when I was like, with Atlanta, but that was probably more their defense and me having to overcommit to the pass in the second half.
Right.
But I ventured, Len, to say that somebody else who is more of a Cousins person might turn around and make Derek Cousins into 100+ QBR. It all depends on your personality. What some guys like quarterbacks who can throw deep and the percentage isn't quite as important. Now next year you're gonna need a quarterback regardless because Cousins was out for so long. But,
right.
But I mean Cousins has value for somebody. somebody would love Cousins. If I didn't have Carr, I'd be begging you for Cousins. So.
Well, I mean, I'll probably hold on to him. Even he won't be worth much, and obviously my record may get me a quarterback. If not here, if not in the rookie draft, then maybe in free agency because I'm going to pick high from the looks of it. But hopefully they'll come back. I know that my PSAFL team is going to be in better shape than my PAFL team.
Yeah, somebody with a name that rhymes with Ron was asking, was inquiring. He's like, I wonder, ask Lynn who he's going to take in the upcoming draft. And I think the idea was like anywhere from like the top, if you had your little birdie on your shoulder and could get the top pick, are you a Caleb Williams type of guy?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's too early. I always shut down Don. He wants to do these trades. I'm like, give me a break. I don't even look at these.
Well, with the PAFL, we have a couple weeks of play to gauge our people, right?
Right. 4 weeks.
So, 4
it's
weeks.
way too early. I mean, it just, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense for me. So you can tell I don't do any of these gentleman agreement trades because it's just way too much. But back to the East. So Carolina sets 5-3. They play Philadelphia, they're a tough team to score with. So if Carolina beats Philadelphia, they'll be 6-3. When I looked at them, their issue could be Herbert, their stud running back. I think he ran over Lynn pretty wickedly. He's only got like 30 rushes left. If I remember right, he's averaging like 7 or 8 yards a carry. Carolina has what I would call 3 doable games: Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and Atlanta. They've got 2 harder games. They are playing the bad boy Bears and the Packers, so they're taking the cream of the crop of the Central. And they still have games in division against Philadelphia, New York, Dallas, and Washington, but they've swept all of them. So in division, they look strong. So it's going to be interesting to see if they catch the Commanders. But so it's going to be, it depends. They have a decent route to 10 wins as well.
Yeah, and if you had asked me about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would have said that only one team is going to get out of the East into the playoffs. But the Rams, they've had not the Rams. I'm sorry, the Chargers have had Chargers have had a bit of a slide lately. Now Valentino's taking over that team, and Valentino knows his stuff. So
right.
I wouldn't be shocked to see that team start to turn their season around, but they're going to have to compete in order to.
It's a dogfight. I agree that there's like there's 8 teams with realistic shots at the playoffs in the East. So 2 decent teams are going to be left out, which brings us to the G-men, the Giants. They're 5-4. They're pretty solid. Dobbins is done, but they got that Hall running back. He's got a screaming high yard per carry. He's ready. They're easier games, quote unquote, against, I hope I don't insult these teams. This is on a relative basis. But they play Detroit and Pittsburgh. Quote unquote, their harder games are Chargers with Val at the helm and Cincinnati. So he gets both of the brothers. And then he's got to do something in division. He's lost to Carolina. He gets a rematch. He's lost to the Commanders. He gets a rematch. He beat Lenz underachieving Dallas. This Dallas team it's just really the bottom fell out. And then Giants still got Philadelphia twice. So again, can they get to 10? I think they have a reasonable route to get to 10 wins. So if you get 3 teams with 10 wins, could be quite the race.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything on that? I don't know if Joe's looked at the Giants.
I I'll put it this way: they've lost some head-to-heads that's going to make their path a little bit harder than some other teams. But like you said, if they turn around, they've got to beat Washington. They've got to beat Carolina. You can't
get swept because you're going to get killed on the tiebreakers.
Yeah, and And plus, also, I might be in danger. I got exposed last week, with Atlanta. So, I like I said, I see there being, I kind of agree with you that there's probably about 8 teams that are competing for 6 spots, and two good teams are going to be on the outside looking in.
That's for sure. So we go to the Central. I don't like to talk about the Bears, but we'll talk about them a little bit. 7-2. I'd say we've only got really what I call an easier game, Miami. We've got harder games, Carolina, the Rams, and Jacksonville. That's that 17th game that was added where number 1 seeds battle. So that's going to be quite the contest. And still got to play Tampa Bay twice. I know they're kind of down, and Detroit and Minnesota, which are wins. Again, the Bears, I don't know, we should win 12 games or so. It just depends. This version of the game is quite trying on me, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I'll let you talk more about my Bears. I don't like talking about the Bears.
Well, ultimately, I think you're competing for the top seed in the NFC. And obviously, the 2 games that are going to probably play a lot into that is going to be Week 15 and Week 17. The Rams and the Jags.
Yeah.
And the one benefit with the Jags is they may be setting guys, because I think they're looking at an undefeated season, or at least trying to compete for that. And then the Rams, Ken's always a tough out. So.
Absolutely. As last year showed, when the Redbirds beat the Bears and I had Latimer thrown out of a game. That didn't help. And one year I had Bitonio, a 10-plus guard, get injured for half of a playoff game. But that makes it interesting. And the Bears, though, we did what we had to do. We had to beat the Packers. If we were swept by the Packers, we'd been in trouble to compete for the Central. But Green Bay's in there 7-2, got a good new owner, Anthony, who I knew from another league, the AFC. Let's see, their easier game, which Joe will maybe dispute a bit, is against Atlanta on a relative basis. And their harder games, though, they've got to play the Rams, they've got to play Cleveland, they've got to play Carolina. And in the division, they haven't played Minnesota yet. They got 2 against Minnesota, and they're done with the Bears. And they have Tampa Bay, who they defeated, and Detroit. Their question, of course, is on Dak. Dak is not a 16-game quarterback. And so they're a very good team. They can easily get up there 12 wins, too. And you can get by without the best quarterbacks in action, in my view.
Yeah, I will say this after having played Atlanta. Atlanta has a very solid defense. And so I think that week in, week out, their defense can compete with most teams out there. The $64,000 question is what kind of performance are you getting from Davis Mills? If you get the good Davis Mills like I got played against, he can tear you up.
Exactly. Again, that goes to any one quarterback on any one day.
Yeah, look what I did with Tannehill last year. Had no expectations for that, but he went through a good stretch until the Super Bowl. Davis Mills plays like he did last week. He can beat the Packers. I believe that. But then again, most weeks he's not going to play to that level. So, but defensively, Atlanta's going to stay in almost every game. And of course, next year they're going to have Stroud. So,
yes. Unfortunately, that's about it for the Central 2-team race. So we go to the West with Mr. Maine, who's like a legend. This is the last year of Brady, though. He's going to have to find a quarterback next year. They're sitting at 7-2. Now, I don't have them with any quote-unquote easier games. They still have got to play Washington, Green Bay, and Chicago. And I couldn't do it, Joe. I couldn't put Denver as an easier game. I don't care that they're in the gutter. They still got Chubb and Allen. It's just like You could probably say, though, Denver is their quote-unquote their easiest game left. They do have Atlanta again, and they do have the Chargers, and they play you twice. So that's a pretty hard finishing 8 games there. There's not many, breathers. Particularly Val is on the Chargers now, and they got Burrow. So you got Burrow, they got Jacobs, they got a lot of weapons too.
Need a little help. Cornerbacks a little average.
But action, you can get by. You just outscore people if possible.
Well, he's got good receivers.
About that. Yeah, he does. He really does.
Tight end.
And Brady doesn't make mistakes.
Right.
And he's got Kamara. And he's got, the Kelsey and Devontae. So he's strong. Nipping at their heels, though, is our man Joe's Redbirds. Joe setting 1 game back. Easier games, I've got down Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Harder games, I did it for you too, Joe. I put Denver in the harder. I just, I got this fixation on Denver it just seems they should, they got a powerful offense. Leave it at that. And you got Washington, and then, of course, you got the Rams twice. And you've got the Chargers in Atlanta, who you've lost to both of those. So you've got to, they got to beat one of them. You got a couple easy ways, maybe easier. You can get to 10 wins, 11 wins as well.
Oh, I could. I mean, Kansas City is a trap game.
Yes, it is, because Kansas City will score like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they got into that shootout with the Raiders, But
as you mentioned, you've got Carr. I took Carr, PSAFL. Got fortunate, went to the Super Bowl, but like you mentioned, Carr needs a strong running game. Because Carr, I don't know, his completions are a little bit low, like right at 60, if I remember right. So you got to have some balance to help him. Or some.
He should be a lot better next year than he is this year.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that in the PSAFL. And now we got the Chargers 5-4, started 5-0, dropped 4 in a row. Unfortunately, Daniel had to quit. And what I see on their schedule for Val, he's got 2 relatively winnable games. San Francisco is having a very down year as well, and then the high-scoring Kansas City. And again, here on the harder games, Joe, I still do this. I put Denver in a harder game. People may disagree. And he's got Las Vegas, which is definitely a hard game, and the Giants. And he finishes, Chargers got to play everybody else in the division one more time. They beat Atlanta and Arizona. They lost to the Rams. Again, different owner, different coach.
That game they lost to Tampa, though, is going to, if they miss the playoffs, it'll be week 8. That'll be the one that keeps him up at night.
But if Val does the work, beats San Francisco, Kansas City, Atlanta, Denver, that's a 9 right there. That's 9 wins. So we'll see. It's always easy on paper. Now we go to Jacksonville, unless anybody else wants to talk about the NFC. I can steamroll if you don't stop me.
Go for it.
Hearing nothing, let's talk about Jacksonville. We don't need to talk about Sean much. They're 9-0. They've got no easier games left, though. Got the Saints twice, Miami twice, interdivision. They beat Buffalo, got them again. Beat Cleveland, got them again. They got Las Vegas and Chicago. The Las Vegas game for number 1 seed, more than likely in the AFC. Home field advantage. The home field advantage in action is pretty incremental, pretty small.
They've got a heck of a defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. That's why they're 9-0, and I think when the dust settles, they're going to they'll probably win their division by 4 or 5 games.
I'd say that's a tough defense.
It's just a well put together team. They've got pretty much everything you need. Got a good running back, got a good quarterback, got good receivers. There's just really no weakness. The only weakness will be when they play the playoff games. Do they get that bad game?
Right.
They have that bad game that can happen, like Latimer getting thrown out of the game, which I forgot about this. So Joe reminded me last week about Slack. So it's kind of annoying me right now. I'd suppressed that. But I'll get over it.
It's only been a year. It's only been a
Yeah,
year.
I built my team around cornerbacks, and he gets thrown out of the game. I'm like, jeez. Anyway, I don't know what you want to say about Jacksonville. I mean, Sean's just got the machine. He's got the team in the East. And even though the Saints are only 2 games back, as we just talked about, Saints are heading to some serious fatigue.
I think they're going to end up with 2 losses, and I think the 2 teams that are going to beat them is Las Vegas and Chicago. Now, can they beat Las Vegas? They can, but Chris is a damn good coach, and that's not going to be a roll me game. And plus, also at the end of the year, unless Sean just doesn't want to take a loss, if he was by chance undefeated and he's willing to just let everything go slide, he'd be a fool to play, have top seed locked up and play all of his guys against you in the last week of the season going into the playoffs. That would just be foolish.
Well, I'm just hoping by then I've at least got the 2nd seed, because I may not care about that game either. That game may be a dud. So let's look at New Orleans now. What do I see for New Orleans? They got 2 easier games, quote unquote, Pittsburgh and Seattle. Seattle, though, is much improved. Pittsburgh is much improved. They've got what I call only 1 harder game against Washington. And the interesting thing about New Orleans, they haven't played Jacksonville yet. They got 2 against Jacksonville. They haven't played Buffalo yet. They got 2 against Buffalo. And they've got 1 against Cleveland, so where they lost. So the Jacksonville 2 games and the Buffalo 2 games are going to define their interdivisional tiebreaker. So they're going to, particularly the Buffalo games, they're going to need probably 1. I haven't done the math here, but they can still get to 10 games, I guess, if they beat Pittsburgh, beat Seattle, upset somebody, whether it's Washington, Cleveland, or Buffalo, maybe Jacksonville. I doubt I don't think they have enough for Jacksonville.
I chat with Don all the time, and I told him, I said that Week 8 game against the Colts, he beats Bob. I go, you're in like Flint. I said, because you would have the head-to-head against so many other teams in the AFC, and they're gonna, and even Don acknowledges, okay, it's been a little bit of smoke and mirrors. He's a great coach. He coaches well and stuff like that. But he's got guys who are just about run out of steam. And but you can score. 10 wins get you in the playoffs. And we'll talk about them probably here in a sec. But yeah, if I had to put a nickel down, I would say the Colts are. I'd probably lean towards the Colts making a run. Now Bob gets snake bit sometimes, and that's his that would be his downfall. But the Colts have the path there to make the playoffs over and leapfrog them.
To the Saints' credit, he is playing all out to win, and he did beat Washington already. So again, Washington, beat Pittsburgh, beat Seattle. You're 10 wins.
Yeah.
Now, you're a mess in division if you don't beat Buffalo or Cleveland once, but that's still 10 wins. So you're in the tiebreaker more than likely. On to Cleveland, Mr. Milton's team, 5-3. My headline for Cleveland, though, is Flacco and Ellinger take over. I guess when I did the first week of predictions, I said they would be in trouble in that game if Stafford got hurt, and darn it, he did get hurt. So Stan's got a bounty hunter on my head. So for Cleveland to go forward, it's going to be the Flacco show and Ellinger show. They do have 2 quote-unquote easier games, San Francisco and Detroit. But they've got some. Okay, here's Denver again. I put Denver on the hard side. I'm giving a lot of love to Denver, but he's got Indiana and Green Bay. Then you got to factor Miami again, who he beat, New Orleans, who he beat, Jacksonville lost, and Cleveland, where he lost. So they're sitting at 5. So for Stan to get to 10, he's got to beat San Francisco, Detroit, Miami, New Orleans, and Denver, or else, those were quote unquote the easier games. He's still got maybe Indiana, things like that, maybe Buffalo, but those are not easy games. But Cleveland is all you want to handle, even without Stafford, with that defense. Unfortunately, Stafford is really hurt. I mean, Lynn just pulled it up. He's like 7 games, so he's going to miss at least the next 6 games. But Stan knows what he's doing. He's in for a dogfight, and they play. So they're 5-3. They haven't played this week. They're playing tonight. In fact, as we talk, they're playing San Francisco. So realistically, Cleveland should be 6-3, which puts them up 1 game on Buffalo with Darryl. Buffalo's 5-4. My headline for Buffalo, of course, L-Jax is the key. He rested L-Jax last week, and he got beat. Who was that against? I have forgotten. You might have it on the screen.
That was Miami.
Miami. That's right. He woke the sleeping giant, but he's got L-Jax is not a 16-game quarterback. It's you pick your poison when you rest them. But Buffalo's easier games, quote unquote, Detroit and Tennessee. And again, don't mean to slight those teams. They're good teams. I just quote unquote relatively easier, harder games. Indiana and Mr. I pay homage to our Vikings, man. I put Minnesota in a harder game for Buffalo just so Eric would be happy with me. No, I really think Minnesota's a good team. And let's see, Buffalo hasn't played New Orleans yet, so one advantage that Buffalo's going to get, they will get to hit New Orleans twice as they hit severe fatigue. And Buffalo also has Jacksonville again, who they lost to, and Cleveland, who they won. So do we see a path here for 10 games? Yeah, I see a pretty easier path than Cleveland for 10 wins, because Detroit, Tennessee, 2 games New Orleans. What's that? That's 4. That's 9. Well, they got to beat somebody else, so it's not quite as easy as I thought. But again, it's a really good division race. For a while, I thought 4 teams could make the playoffs. Indiana is messing that statement up by winning too much, but that's okay. It makes for interesting conversation.
Well, and here's fun fact for Cleveland. Okay, they've allowed 84 points through their first 8 games.
Exactly.
Now, one of those games was against Jacksonville. They allowed 28. They allowed 19. You are the second highest scoring team against Cleveland this year.
With 19.
With 19. Yeah. So all these other teams that have to play Cleveland, in order to beat them, you got to score. And so far, the only team that has seemed to crack that nut on a consistent basis has been Jacksonville. So
they got the players. I mean, they got the studs.
Yeah, they've got a game plan against Stan, and Stan figures out Sean's number. If anybody figures that out and gives Stan a PM, that Sean would be in a world of hurt, because that for the last couple of years, Stan's had the best defense in PAFL. Period.
Mm-hmm. On the playoffs, at least they'll have Stafford.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to that key break. Herbert has an off game like he did last week. Anything's possible. Of course, in action, anything's possible anytime. So you have to. I have to put myself in a certain mindset when I play these games. Like, I don't know. I think I'm going to lose. And once I put my expectations at losing, then that's the way I cope with it.
Well, people complain about Action PC and some of that, and some of it's not being realistic. I counter that it's probably too realistic for most people's comfort level, because that happens in the NFL every single week. And the fact that they've managed to program that into this game is infuriating if you have a good team. But
yeah,
it's
those
realistic.
Random things, like hike over the head. Against Green Bay, there was a couple of those. Hike over the head, drops this, like, oh man, we're hitting all of these rare plays left and right.
Like Miami, they had a punt return for a touchdown and a pick 6. They beat Buffalo. That
Exactly.
happens in the NFL. If I'm Buffalo, I'm steaming. I'm ready to throw my computer through, on top of Andy's. But that's the way the NFL is, and so I think this is a marathon. And then when the playoffs come up, anything can happen. Which is what
I
happened. I
agree.
mean, which is what happened to Kansas. Kansas City won the Super Bowl and were a shank to the right against Buffalo from not making it out of the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I know they think they're good, but I mean, they for a Super Bowl winning team, they're pretty lame. I know Doug won't like that comment, but and they're just not that strong. Let's see. Before I get in more trouble, we'll go to Nino in the Central. Our Cincinnati 6-3. Cincy's got a pretty favorable schedule coming in. They've got Seattle, Kansas City, and Miami. What I put on the easier slate. The harder games, I actually dropped Philadelphia in there, even though I don't know, they're just kind of down this year, and the Giants. And then he's got to play everybody else in the division one more time, and he won all those games. So Nino here could easily, I don't know, pull 12 wins as well. I mean, I see if he wins the 3, that's 9. If you beat Tennessee, Pittsburgh, that's 11. Beat Philadelphia, you're at 12. I mean, he can run some wins here with a team that he would probably say isn't strong enough, to go all the way. But in the right circumstances, you just don't know what can happen. I don't know what you think about Cincy, Joe.
Oh, Nino is maybe one of the better coaches out there. And yeah, he probably doesn't have the team he wants to have for making a run, but he's going to make a run. I mean, he'll be there at the end.
And now we get to Mr. Dufree, Mr. Bob, Indiana, sitting at 5-4. So Len's ears are going to perk up here in a minute. So Indiana's got what I call 2 easier games. One's against the 49ers, one's against the Cowboys. I mean, it's hard for me to say that, but
he'll win it. He'll win it.
So there's 2 of those. Now his harder game ledger is pretty. He's got Cleveland, which is a big game with playoff implications, as you mentioned to Don, on losing to Indiana, and Indy's also got Buffalo. So these couple games, Cleveland and Buffalo, could be the difference between somebody making the playoffs and somebody not. Because we also have 8 teams in the running, strong running here in the playoffs in the AFC. And Indy's challenge is they play everybody in their division. They beat Pittsburgh, but they've lost to Tennessee and Cincinnati. So do they get swept by one of those teams? Do they right the ship? So I think Bob's got a little bit tougher road to hold than Cincinnati, but flip side is it's all in his hands. Win the easy games, win your divisional games, and you're 10-plus wins. Beat Philadelphia, you're at 11.
Well, this is the way I told it to Don. It's like, okay, you got weeks 12, 13, 14, and 15. You got San Fran, Pittsburgh, Philly, and Tennessee. And then you got the last week against Dallas. On paper, they should be probably favored in all of those games. And if they win 4 of those games, that means Don has to win 10 games in order to beat him out for the playoffs.
Yeah.
I said, now, if Bob wins all 5 of those games, I don't see Don winning 11.
Not going to happen because the 0-8 Cowboys are gunning for Bob.
There you go. And Bob has been snake bit before. I mean,
Dallas will win a game, Lynn. They have to. There's
No,
a
they-
lot.
yeah.
Your defense is like, I don't know, out to lunch, but
Yeah.
Cousins has got to get hot for one.
Yeah, we're
game.
not gonna get the first overall pick. We might get number 3 or 4, and I'm not even sure about that.
The what was I going to say here? The one thing though, the tiebreaker may not matter as much with New Orleans if you get like a 3-way tie, because then that gets a little, confusing. You bring a third team in there tied with New Orleans and Indiana, or maybe even a 4th, then it becomes messy, and I'd have to review the tiebreakers. But just because he lost to Indy doesn't kick him out automatically.
But who's the team that's going to do it?
That's for
Everybody else has got 3 wins or less.
sure. Yeah. But you never know.
Never know.
Miami rose
That's true.
up against Buffalo. I don't mean to remind Daryl. And this just today, I had to add in. I added in Tennessee 4 and 5. They're only 2 games back, but 2 games back. They not out of the division yet. I'll be surprised because I think since he's got a favorable schedule. So Tennessee, their easier games. Here you go again, Len. Dallas and San Francisco. This is that you can tell which conferences are playing each other this year on the schedule.
Right.
AFC Central, NFC East. That's similar. The harder games for Tennessee is Carolina, Buffalo, and my soft spot again, Denver. Denver in the heart. Now, in Tennessee's favor, they play everybody in their division, and they beat Indy, and they beat Pittsburgh, and they lost to Cincy. So that Indy-Tennessee second match is another big one, Joe, because if Indy somehow loses twice to Tennessee, that's just that's a tough thing like New Orleans has with their tiebreakers.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Well, I'm almost done. The good thing is, I don't know. I don't think Tennessee has an easy route to 10 wins. They'd have to beat San Francisco and Dallas to get to 6. They're harder games. Carolina, Buffalo, Denver. I mean, they can get to 10, but I mean, none of their games except, these are all tough games inside their division. And the reason we have so much time is when you get Len to the AFC West, there's nothing to talk about because, the Raiders are just smoking everybody. That race is almost over. They got like a 6-game lead with 8 games to go. They are, unless Cincy really runs some wins, there's really the 1 and 2 seeds are pretty well defined already in the AFC. I mean, if Cincy runs the table, that they could make it somewhat interesting, but they still need these guys to lose a couple. And Cincinnati's already lost 2. I mean, Las Vegas, Chris has got an awesome team. It matches up quite well with Jacksonville across the board. I mean, he's got a lot of offense. You might say his running backs aren't quite to Pollard, but I mean his defensive backs, it's a pretty solid team all the way through.
Yeah, I had made the flippant remark during the article. I sat there and said, yeah, they'll have it wrapped up by Easter. And then I started looking and said, when is Easter this year? It's March 31st. Oh, they should have this division wrapped up before then.
Probably 2 weeks. I mean, it depends. 2 more wins, 6-game lead. And not to say the rest of that division is improving, with the exception of Denver, who just really hit the gutter this year. But the other teams are all on the rise. But, Las Vegas is a very solid team. As you can tell, the power ranking number 1 is Las Vegas.
Yeah, they.
Well, I've taken over. I know Rudy pretty well in some other leagues, and I think Rudy kind of coaches like I do. It gets very frustrating to coach a team with a really mediocre to crappy defense, and because then it doesn't matter what you call, it doesn't matter how many guys you blitz, it doesn't matter who you cover, who you double. Sometimes you just get rolled because the other team just can. And there's nothing worse than playing those type of games, which is one reason why I invest so much in defense. At least I'd like to be in the game.
Yeah, and week 8 on Len's screen, 44-47.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been a fun game to watch, though.
Yeah, maybe not if you're Denver. But
or Len. You get ahead and then you watch another team score. It kind of
you just grin and bear it.
Yeah.
But looking at Len, so Len's 0-8. There's 2 teams with 1 loss: Miami, San Francisco, and a few teams with 2 losses. I almost picked you, Len, against the Giants. I really wanted to. I can't remember. I think I changed my mind and wimped out because you do have enough to beat somebody. You just don't know when.
I'm gunning for Bob.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
Bob's
Well,
a good
like
guy.
I said, if you have a high draft pick there, Lynn, I mean, somebody needs a quarterback, and you've got Cousins. You can always do like Calvin did in another league where he traded his number 2 overall for Micah Parsons. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of quarterbacks in this draft, at least 3 or 4. I can't
Yeah.
believe they're putting the Michigan guy in there. Not that I'm an
I
expert by any means, but you'll get to watch him play 4 regular season games. But more than likely, top 2 or 3 will get you either Daniels or the North Carolina guy, May, whatever his name is. So, I mean, there's a quarterback there. Or you just do it another way. Somebody will have to give up. There's pass attempts there somewhere. And that's with 28 teams. There's always some fair amount of passes left over if you don't like who's left, or if they gobble up the 3 quarterbacks before you pick 4th or something.
Yeah, well, I'll probably have a pretty good pick for the first round of the free agency, and then also, obviously, the draft as well. So I'll figure something out. I mean,
Free agency is bidding though, so you'll have to
we still
remember
bidding
we
there?
don't.
I thought you were
We're
switching that
still
around.
bidding. No, we're deep in the bidding here. I mean, we thought the bidding was better. I mean, the PSFA AFL we changed from Doug's original design that bidding, quote unquote, lets the weaker teams get more of the better players. That's the theory.
It's a theory. I've not seen it really accomplish it yet, but
So we could change. I mean,
That's
it's
up to you
something
guys.
that we have flip-flopped on over the years.
Yeah.
It goes either way.
I might have expressed my opinion a time or two on that.
Yeah, we know Joe doesn't like it.
Well, I mean, I don't know, paying $8 million for a punt returner. Just I don't think that was the intention of the rule to begin with. But what do I know?
No, I know. We'll have to think about it.
It's a
One of
lot
the
of extra.
downsides-
It's a lot of extra
Yeah.
work, And what does it accomplish? I mean, that's one of the things I've noticed. It's a heck of a lot of extra work, and does it really accomplish its purpose? And it's definitely something we probably want to think about in the PAFL. Approach the league about it and see what others think.
Yeah, I figured out how to do it, at least on Strat Drafts, on the bidding. Because one thing we'd have to do if we go to a free agent draft, I'd have to have them really increase the number of players you can upload to draft from, because we've got like over 1,000. There's a huge number. I forget the magic number is, but we only upload a few hundred. I mean, they can change it, but that makes for a huge draft pool. Not that that's the end of the world if that's what people want.
I've seen on Strat Draft though, where I mean they've it's like when you're sitting there starting to dealing with salaries is where they get limited. But it appears that if you're just like listing players and you're just drafting them, that they allow a lot of players to be uploaded.
Yeah, but we hit the max.
Okay.
I've hit it a couple times. You have to request more. I mean, that's not a big deal. It can be done. But
I mean, that's my major. I mean, as I think I've told you, Calvin. I mean, you could give me the first pick of the free agent draft, and if I'm up there against the cap, I'm not picking Purdy. I'm not picking. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't do it if I wanted to. I'm picking 350, 450K guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we get through that part of the draft, and then we get to the low end guys, and then all of a sudden, guys have money left over, and they're spending like drunken sailors at a party, and for guys that, I mean, Action PC gives them a salary for a reason, and that reason just goes out the window, and you don't have the ability to go back and take any of the guys previously that were available. You have to kind of wait for the 350K guys to come up, and by that time, and so that's always been my major objection to the to the bidding. That and there's just certain guys, Andy being one of them. They just don't do well in that type of thing. That rolling math, really, and I don't think you should have to have that skill in order to be successful. The fact that Andy's in first place, and really, I don't think he's ever signed a top end free agent, it says something for his drafting ability. I got to give him credit for that.
I think he signed somebody last year. I might be wrong. I know Kansas City did a good job. I mean, it's something we can't take lightly because it's. I guess I'm different. I'm a fan of it. I wasn't at first, but for the weaker ones, or lets them get a couple players that there's no way they would get. Because sure, they'll get number 1, but they're not going to come around till number 29. 28 other players. They're not going to get that punt returner. They're not going to get the kicker. They're not going to get anybody. They're all going to be gobbled up. And see, I'll talk against myself. A team like Chicago, picking 26, can get that 350 guy that's a stud. I'll call him a stud. He's my little diamond in the rough, and I get him for 350, and nobody else is even looking at that. Then they're looking at other things. So that's the thing.
Yeah. All right, guys, we are looking at our last 55 seconds of time here. So is there anything you need to run through really quick?
No, I think we're good. We're rolling along. We got some openings in PSFA, AFL. I'm not worried. We've got months to fill them. Main reason we have opens, we lost both of the mains, and but we got Colin. Colin's a strong owner. I played with him years ago in the off-season football league. Colin is a very strong addition.
Good.
So I feel good about that.
All right.
And until next month, we'll do this again.
Yes, and not as long as we took this time.
I have no more cruises planned, so I'll be available.
All right.
Cool.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Well, at least not until the fall.
Take care.
Appreciate y'all.
Okay. All right, bye.
That's all, folks.